Welcome to the Depth Dialogues podcast.
where we explore how depth psychology is applied to tackle contemporary social issues.
I'm Kirk Schneider.
And I'm Tyler Gamlin. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Today we are honored to welcome Adanna Eke. Adanna is a psychotherapist and mental health consultant specializing in trauma recovery, perinatal mental health, and the link between women's physical and emotional well-being. She graduated from Columbia University's School of Social Work and completed her psychoanalytic training at the New Center for Psychoanalysis in Los Angeles. Adanna began her career in child welfare in the South Bronx and went on to work in emergency mental health at Sutter, UCLA, and Cedars-Sinai. She's the founder of The Depth Studio, a private practice that offers therapy and consultation services integrating psychoanalytic and trauma-informed approaches. She's also a co-clinical director of the Los Angeles chapter of A Home Within, a national nonprofit that provides free long-term psychotherapy to current and former foster youth. Adanna is also a founding member of Building Practice in Community, a program offered by A Home Within. Please join me in welcoming Adanna Eke to the Depth Dialogues podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Tyler. And thank you so much, Adanna, for connecting with us and being willing to share your really important story. So my first question really centers on being struck by how many involvements that you're involved in. So many different areas that seem to cluster around applying depth principles of practice to socially challenging settings or situations. And it seems like a home within is one of the core areas that you're engaged in. So I wonder if you could elaborate for us on just what a home within provides and maybe something about what motivated you to be a co-founder, as I understand it, of A Home Within. Is that right?
I'm a co-founder of the LA chapter, a
Okay.
co-clinical director of the LA chapter. We had directors prior.
Uh-huh.
The Home Within is a nonprofit, and we offer different programs. So I co-founded the Building Practice Within Community program. But a Home Within has existed and will exist long before me and after me. So yeah.
Good clarification. But yeah, if you could tell us more about A Home Within and what motivated you to become so involved in that group and their lineage.
Yeah. So, A Home Within is a nonprofit. It's a national nonprofit, and we have over 600 volunteers, and we have multiple chapters across 16 states. And so it's really wide-reaching and widespreading. And the objective of A Home Within is to provide free therapy services to foster youth or formerly engaged foster youth. So we have clients that are as early as sort of young teens, children, and we have clients as old as, in their 60s and 70s who were at one point in their lives touched by the foster care system, right? Or care involved youth, as we sometimes call it. And what makes A Home Within unique and special is the fact that our volunteers were volunteer therapists run totally and completely, but our volunteers are with our clients no matter what, as long as it takes. And so this isn't something that's bound by 12 sessions, 6 months, a year. The goal is to work with the client for as long as one can work with the client. And so we have people that have been volunteering for 10 plus years, 5 plus years. And the idea of that, the crux of that type of model, and I think what makes it so unique as a nonprofit is that, again, we're not bound by time, but what that does is it allows what we would call relational type of work to happen, right? And sometimes it's hard to say I'm relational, but we only have 12 sessions to do this. Okay,
Hmm.
we're going to really utilize a relational type of therapy modality, but we have our Medi-Cal sessions, we have, only X amount. And particularly when we're talking about folks who are youth involved or system involved, particularly with the foster youth system, there's so much disruption that happens in the family. There's so much disruption that happens within their systems. And so this is really such a unique idea in which we're able to provide that long-term therapy and actually live sort of the therapeutic model of a relational type of therapeutic relationship, right? Or you're seeing someone through many changes and stages. I've been with the Home Within for about almost 3 years at this point. I've had my client for about as long as that. And it's really amazing the kind of work that can get done, the ways in which you can not only understand your client, but they can see. It's really, and it's, how can I say this? It's reparative in many
Yeah.
ways,
Hmm. Hmm.
when the process reflects actually life in a sense of what's happened in regards to like what's happening and the duration of the therapeutic relationship. And then in terms of like why I wanted to be a part of a home within, I, I just I saw that and I saw that model and I think I saw this tagline, however long it takes. And I think I kind of fell in love with it a little bit. I was like, oh, this is nice. We're really cutting through the bureaucracy, we're cutting through the funding restrictions, the red tape, and it's attracting the type of clinician who says, you know what, I do have 1 or 2 spots that I can offer for free and as long as it takes. And I think for me, just having, again, worked in child welfare, having worked in ER settings, when you're in the ER, every minute matters.
Hmm.
And the
Yes.
idea is to get them out of there. And it serves its purpose, right? But that to me, I think, given the career that I've had, just seemed really appetizing. And I just really, really, I love that. And it felt like such an alleviation almost.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wasn't forced to feel like I had to force an outcome with the client or I had to
Hmm.
really, push for or just push them off to the next provider.
Right.
Like, no, we're gonna sit here, we're gonna do this, and I don't need you to be okay in 6 sessions. You
Yeah.
don't need to be okay in 6 sessions.
Do you
Yeah.
find that,
Go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. I was just going to ask, do you find that this model attracts a certain type of clinician based on what you're sharing? Because it's not just however long it takes, which is a great benefit, but but when we talk about the relational and depth approach, that's going to be another level of therapy quality because it could be CBT open-ended, and
Yeah.
that's going to be a different kind of experience. I dare to say outcome because the literature says that there is not a difference in terms of the outcome, which we can get into that later. But but do you feel that this in your role as both a clinician volunteering your time and a co-clinical director, do you see that this is attracting a different kind of therapist, counselor into this organization?
I would say so.
Yeah.
Therapy, I had a supervisor one time who told me therapy takes something from you. To be a therapist, to really be there,
Mm.
tune yourself and be present, it takes something from you. And I think the type of person who wants to volunteer and not just volunteer with the worried well, right? We're volunteering with people who have been through some of, dare I say, some of the worst things. I mean, outside of working with folks who are like veterans or, have gone through combat, you know, there was a study once that looked at children in the South Bronx in particular when I worked there, and we used to always iterate that study, which was the degree of PTSD and trauma is very similar to that of children who were growing up in war-torn Afghanistan, right?
Mm,
This is an intense population that is all around us in this country. And the type of person who would want to work with that particular population for free, I think it does
mhm,
attract a
mhm,
different type of clinician. I think
mhm,
it attracts someone who is looking, maybe might be a little disillusioned with sort of the systems that exist. And that's not to down the systems that exist or the ways in which we practice therapy out in the world, whether it's through hospital systems, other nonprofits, or even within private practice. But I think it does attract a different person who maybe wants something that isn't so bound. Obviously,
mhm,
within we provide a lot of education for our clinicians in terms of trauma-informed training, consultations, group supervision, things of that nature. So there's a lot of support that's given to the clinicians. So they're not out in the wild, but it is a different kind of person, I believe, that would want to do this work or
mhm.
be.
So, are many of your clinicians part-time or are they full-time? Like, is this something that people feel you know, they can support themselves with this kind of engagement? Or,
Yeah, so the all our clinicians are are volunteers. So most all of them I would say are part-time. I mean, the max I've seen like through 2, 3 volunteer clients. But a lot of them
Mhm,
work in private practice themselves, which offers them a certain degree of flexibility. Some of them do agency work, or they are involved, let's say they're hospital social workers or hospital LMFTs. But yes, it sort of runs the gamut, but typically people have a full-time gig or a job outside of the work that they do
yeah,
at the
this is something we've been advocating for a long time. If clinicians in this country could take even a fraction of
Mhm.
the time that they spend in their private practices or in their paid work and
mhm,
offer it to people in underserved communities in particular, especially longer term, in-depth relationships, that could be a really major shift in terms of affordability, accessibility, and I believe help lift the psychological well-being of our nation,
mhm.
if it was enough of a mobilization. So I'm really excited and appreciative that you guys are doing this. I'm also wondering, can you give us an example of how you apply, let's say, psychodynamic or psychoanalytic principles with maybe younger people, where
Mhm,
we know it's often difficult for them to engage in a more talk type of therapy. Not
Mhm.
always, but I wonder about that. Uh, and just generally in the work, do you have some examples or stories that can concretize? How do you draw from your obvious in-depth knowledge of psychoanalytic ways of working, in-depth ways of working to the clientele that you're working with now?
Yeah, I would say, I typically work with adults, but when it comes to working with youth, I do find that especially with young children, play therapy is always so critical. Like it's so palpable. It's a really good way to get right in there to those unconscious drives. So those, I mean, subconscious drives, motives, and things of that nature. So we have some clinicians that are actually play therapists. And I'll speak to like working with older kids because I can speak more to that population. But for our children, play therapy is huge. And it's a really good way when you set up a scenario for a child, particularly under the age of 8, 7 or 8, for them to be able to, for you to be able to observe, okay, what are some of the drives? What's happening here? You know, we have a lot of children who have experienced, sexual abuse, sexual assault, things of that nature. And we, I had a clinician one time who was talking to me about how they set up like a house.
Mm.
And they had a little doll that they
Mhm.
used. And the doll it could have been anybody, right? We allowed the child to sort of project what elements of themselves they wanted to, sort of project onto that doll. And the doll kind of moved, they moved the doll in different parts of the house. And this was a child that was struggling with, continence issues, bathroom, things of that nature. And when the doll went to the bathroom part of the house, the child started getting really agitated. So this is something we were kind
Mm.
of
Mhm.
processing in consultation. And they started making a mess of the bathroom, a mess of the toilet,
Mm.
a mess of the bathroom. And I won't get into too much, but essentially there was a lot of, there were some things that were happening. But through that play, we were able to kind of really get an understanding of what their mental map and landscape was as it related to their bodies, as it related to that sort of function. And we
Mhm.
began to introduce what's a different narrative,
Mm.
right? What's a story of possibility?
Mhm.
What do you think
Mm.
she could do in the bathroom instead? Or how about I help you clean that up a little bit?
Mm.
So it's not as clean, when you're in the practice, when you're in the world, these theories don't happen so cleanly and pristinely, right? But, there's an element of depth psychology just within the praxis of play therapy. There's also
Mhm.
an element of narrative therapy as well that oftentimes with children, when you're trying to restructure. And then there's what I
Mhm.
like to call the house, which is a trauma-informed lens, which
Mhm.
allows us to really even just hold space for some of the things like a very messy bathroom, right? A very messy diaper, right? It, all of these sorts of things. And so
Mm.
I would say it's like a mixed bag. It's not
Mhm.
necessarily a clean sort of, okay, we're going to really go into like Freud, there's elements of
Mhm.
Erickson that informs that. There's elements of Freud that's informing that. There's elements of positive psychology when we think about the tone and how we're speaking to our patients and really kind of creating a pathway or even just an aperture for them to be able to even express and say certain
Mhm.
things that informs how we're holding space for this really intense trauma that
Mhm.
in the real world, there's no space for. In the real world, this kid keeps, pooping and peeing on themselves, and oftentimes they're being beaten by the parents or
Mm.
slapped or smacked. But within the therapeutic sort of relationship, we're able to, one, take our time, but also create a world in which they can be messy and we can kind of figure it
Mm.
out and sort of,
Mm.
like kind of ride the wave of it. And so when it comes to children, I think play therapy is really, really powerful.
Mm.
With my clinicians, I've seen a lot of really powerful work over time and sometimes quite quickly be done through the use of
Mm.
play therapy.
Mhm.
And in terms of my work with teens, I would say that, I'm always, and this is kind of what I learned when I was in school, when it comes to psychoanalysis, psychodynamic sort of orientations or theories, I'm not practicing anything, but I'm holding this knowledge.
Mm.
I'm
Mhm.
holding this sort of understanding. Okay, there are some hidden drives, there are some of overt drives that I'm observing. There are, there are behaviors or sort of, underlying, not statements, but sentiments that appear to be existing. There's tension within sort of the dynamic between mother and father, or
Mm.
there's reenactments happening.
Yes.
I'm holding these theories in my mind, and I'm through just kind of delicate, playful, I'm
Mm.
from the Bay Area, so depending on who
Mhm.
my client is,
Mhm.
oh, same, wonderful. Yeah. So, there's sometimes a cadence or a way in which we can talk to, our more casually, but we're holding these theories in our mind and we're recognizing what's happening or what we're observing, what we believe to be happening within our patients. So when we talk about relationships, that's a big one with my teens.
Right.
Relationships, not just romantic, but also with family, with,
Yeah.
self-development, identity, right?
Hmm.
And so,
That's often, yeah.
oh, mhm.
Sorry. Go ahead. I'm so sorry.
Oh no, feel free to cut me off because I'm a talker. So I'm a
Oh,
New Yorker, so I can
well,
talk. But yeah.
I was just gonna jump in on what you're saying there was in terms of the relational piece, often that's not explicitly covered in adolescence. We don't really talk to kids about relating to others. It's modeled, and then when they're acting out, it's scolded. And then there's the kind of like, how do we deal with this now? But often we don't have those direct conversations about relating to others. And we learn that kind of, implicitly through sports. There's the like being on a team, not wanting to be on the outside of a group. What goes into that? There's the gossip and the cliques, and then there's the aggression that can be played out on the field. So we
Mhm.
kind of see relating, and we internalize as youth, how it's affecting us, what our parents do. I don't want to be like mom and dad, and that kid's cool, so I'm going to be like him. And but there's not really like a lesson, right? We don't really learn about that explicitly, and that's why I'm so fascinated with this model. And I would like to, if we have some time, to get into a little bit of the organization side as well. How does one accomplish something like a home within? How do we set out to achieve that? But I just wanted to note that, just kind of tag that it's really nice to see that when you accent the play therapy, especially for kids, that that we are having more of kind of a lesson in some ways in terms of the relating and learning about that modeling. If
Uh,
our caregivers are not providing a healthy example, we often fill in the gap and then figure it out later.
yeah,
Correct?
one thought that comes to mind is, are you providing an emotionally corrective experience
Yeah,
for many of your
exactly.
patients? So you're nodding.
Yeah, absolutely. I think particularly with children, even with teens too. I mean, honestly, I feel like some of my adults are children on the inside. They're still
Mm,
children, right? And I'm sure in practice you both have seen that as well. But I think emotionally corrective experiences are so critical. And sometimes it takes time to get that raw emotion out. I
mhm.
find that oftentimes with patients, even within my own private practice, but particularly with my home within clients, it is there's a lot of performance because oftentimes people are taught, particularly when you have immense amounts of trauma, there is a performance that happens. There's a performance that they go through, even to go do things as simple as go to work. I'm
Mm,
putting on a mask. And to even be able to identify, again, so bringing in depth psychology and psychoanalysis, the false self that presents
mhm,
itself in the therapeutic space, being
Mhm.
able to see that, being able to carefully and with compassion and love identify it in the room.
Mhm.
And it takes time because sometimes when you just meet someone, and depending on, the culture in which they come from, if you say, I think that's a false self, and you say it
mhm,
so very plainly, they will look at you like you're crazy. But some people might be incredibly offended.
mhm,
I hear statements when I was earlier in my training, like 10 plus years ago. I would, you get so excited, you have all this language, and you just want to use it. And I had a couple clients who'd be like, you don't know me like that. And
mhm.
I'd have to really, take it back to my consultation and check myself and like, yeah, she's actually right. I don't know her like that.
Yeah.
So being able to, and that's why the relational component is so, so important. And to be able to attune yourself. I mean, that is like when I'm doing trainings, I always talk about attunement, 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 attunement. Can you attune yourself to your client?
Yes.
Because if you can do that, then you can, again, bring up these theories in a way that is compassionate, loving, but appropriate,
Right.
right? And at the right time.
Right. We talk about it in terms of presence.
Yes.
Can you be deeply present to your client? And that's a rare thing in this world anyway, just as a foundation. But it sounds like you engage presence in a very mindful, heartful way,
Mm,
and it helps to guide your work with that particular client and that particular circumstance and context. And what I'm hearing is maybe some mentoring too in some way, or I mean, they're learning about an adult who can be real with them in a responsive rather than reactive way, which is huge,
yeah.
and potentially trust
Yeah. Mhm.
this adult, trust relationship, trust
Mhm.
having caring or loving feelings,
Oh, yeah.
and you'll be okay. Anyway,
Mhm.
I'm brainstorming right now.
No, absolutely. I think one of the things that trauma robs us of is the capacity to be present in our bodies and to sort of trust without having to really think about it, right? And I think for those of us who are blessed and, grow up with, sort of secure attachment, secure systems, we take that for granted. And you don't recognize all the ways in which growing up in survival robs you of so many little moments. So even as my clients are talking to me about, a trip that they took, right? For older clients, like trips that they've taken or friendships that they have, and being able to mirror
Mm,
just that sort of presence of like attunement and listening, but also being able to, again, with kindness and with a sense of, with kindness and a sense of humility, I guess is the word, the best, being able to say, oh, that's interesting that you said that. It's interesting that you've known this person for 5 years, but you felt so hesitant. What was
mm,
going on there? And it's like, I don't know. I don't know. I guess I'm always hesitant when it comes to certain things. So being able to really point out those moments in which the trauma creeps up, right? The mistrust creeps up, the fear
mm,
creeps up, the withholding of love and self creeps up, the
mhm.
acting out the reaction creeps up.
Right.
So
So
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, it sounds like you provide something of a mirror to that client,
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
you
Yeah.
help them to see, to uh, feel, you know, where there are blocks or where they have deep desires,
Mhm.
and those have not come out in general relationships. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so important because we talk about, you know, and I talk about this with some of my consultation folks outside of Home Within, but this idea of what does it really mean to walk with someone to the point where they are living in their fullness,
Mm,
And I mean this in, a very living in a fullness of desire, right? A fullness of joy, a fullness of self, an almost type of self-actualized, but there's almost like a lust for life. There's a joy. There is what does it take to move someone to that place when they have been through so much?
right.
And it can almost feel dangerous to show up as self, right?
Right.
I had a client one time and we did an art activity And this is a, older client, like 30 plus years old. And essentially with the art activity, I had her draw herself, and she was just like, there's so many parts of me. The way she drew herself was like split. She's like, this is what I show, but there's so many parts of her on the inside that she said felt ugly, dirty, sewage,
Mm-hmm.
used up, all of this stuff, right? And so just even being able to acknowledge that through the activity, she was like, oh, I didn't even realize I felt all of that. It was one of those like inside outside type of things. And so when we talk about adults who feel like children, and that's not to infantilize, but it's
Mm-hmm.
simply to recognize that there's been so much disruption here, in terms of their relationships, in terms of even just disruptions in terms of, we think about children as they grow up, they go through certain things, they speak at certain ages, they sort of learn how to, use the restroom at certain times, they regulate their emotions and bodily functions. And for this client and so many clients that we work with at a home within, all of that is disorganized and dysregulated. And I'll say as someone who's worked with foster youth and with, court involved youth, I mean, so you would be amazed some of the situations that children exist and live through. I mean, up until the age of 7, and there's just all of those things have been disrupted, delayed, in just the most perverse ways. And so really through love and through care and with a sense of gentleness, being able to reveal some of that to the patient, like, and how that shows up in their adult life, even as adults, right? It's useful. And it's sort of what it's how, it's this idea of, okay, how can we bring these things that are hidden to the light? And then how can we then begin to do some work around that to
Mm-hmm.
correct, whether that's through a corrective experience, whether that's through sort of, sometimes it's just plain psychoeducation, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'd be surprised how many people just don't know certain
Right.
things regarding trust, relationships, boundaries. When all that's disrupted and disorganized, it can sound very simple, but when that mass drops, I find myself, I'm just talking to a 7-year-old girl who really needs to learn, okay, this is how you kind of do things around showering. This is how you do things around personal hygiene. And this is how you start to, construct friendships and boundaries. And this is how you kind
Mm-hmm.
of check in with yourself, whether or not someone feels good or doesn't, it's reconstructing all of those things. And it sounds incredibly primitive, but this is what trauma does.
Yeah.
It, you know,
It also makes me wonder about social justice issues too. Is that does that come in as part of the challenges for many of these kids? Are they people of color, for example? Are they, they feel devalued in society or in their own subculture? Or I just wonder if that becomes part of the sort of demystifying,
Mm-hmm.
unpacking experience.
yeah, I think especially, and I've really noticed this over the past probably like 5 years, right? There's a huge emphasis on social justice. There's a really huge emphasis on racial consciousness and, justice, the consciousness of, all of these sorts of things. These are conversations that come into the room. And I think what I notice the most is this concept of like identity. I've noticed with patients, there's the identity that the media is holding on to or maybe projects. But then there's this idea of how do I organize that within myself and exist with an identity that feels aligned, honest, true,
Mm-hmm.
all of these things. And so, yeah, absolutely. That makes its way into the conversation, to the therapeutic space. And even as clinicians, just when we're doing trainings, it's like, how do we really prepare our clinicians at a home within for this stuff? Because oftentimes our clients are at the intersections, you know.
Mm.
Yeah. I'm curious if we could talk a little bit about the organization of a home within. And I know that this is volunteer based. How has it been able to flourish in the way that it has? And
Mhm.
one thing that, Kirk mentioned this earlier, but we have a certificate program and these different emphases, and one of them is focused on um, this area, kind of in general,
Yeah.
and the idea being at the end of the certificate program, the members will write a 3 to 5 page case study and how they would essentially, it could be a proposal of this is how I would implement what I've learned in this emphasis section into an idea. And one thing that I thought of when I learned of a home within was this would be a wonderful proposal. I can imagine it being a proposal, and yet here we are, it's actually come to fruition. So I'm so fascinated too about how it has functioned and how that can be sustainable because I think we need more of a
Mhm.
home within type of organizations.
And if I could just add to that, I think it would be great. It would be like manna from heaven for our employees to have a place like yours
Mhm.
to do their, you know,
Yes.
2 hours a week or whatever,
Yes.
to
Yep.
work with the underserved. Uh,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
We're always looking for folks to partner with, so we could definitely have that conversation. I think yeah, that would be wonderful. So that's that thing. And then in terms of how a home within, I believe, has been able to stay alive and do the work that they're doing, I think it's the mission. I truly like, and I know that sounds very sort of kitschy, but tr the mission I think is incredibly potent. We're here for as long as it takes. And this idea, there was our founder, we were talking to him, and he was just iterating so beautifully this idea of we want to support these folks that we work with actually creating a home within, right?
Mm-hmm.
Foster youth, trauma involved, folks who go through so much. The body, the self can be so you just want to escape it, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's through substances, whether that's through dissociation, whether that is through, I mean, a medley of activities that take you out of yourself because it's just such a tenuous place to be.
Yeah.
And this idea of we're here for as long as it takes. This is not a marathon. I mean, this is not a race, it's a marathon. And we're here till you find your home within. And if you can
That's
do
beautiful.
that, you are. I know I cried when I heard it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think
My
the
favorite,
hmm?
it's one of my favorite expressions for what I think this therapy can bring. That sense of inner freedom and and capacity to adorn your inner life like you might adorn your home, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that that message, I think, is just incredibly potent. And I think it's the reason why we've opened new chapters in Missouri, in Colorado, and I think Indiana and Arizona. I think it catches like wildfire. And when you sit in front of people, when you sit in front of clinicians, when you sit in, we sit in front of city council members and promote the program, it is, it's potent. It's, you can feel it. You can feel it in the room. You can feel it in the space. So to me, that's, I think, the number one reason why the program has been able to stay alive. I think that's why it's growing. I think there is, especially in this world, and I don't want to get too much into politics, but there's so much happening in the world. This idea of, you know what, we're here till you need us to be here. Our door is always open. I mean, that is such a replication of what the family system should be. And in
Hmm.
so many ways, and so many tiers, and so many levels, um, in this world, in this society, that's so broken. Everything feels so finite. Everything feels so, it's about exchange. What you could do for me for a fee for this. Your insurance got canceled. You're not the right fit.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but no, this is a different kind of thing. We are here for as long as you need us to be. And I think in a world that in which people are literally starving
Yeah,
for love, for visibility, for
Yeah.
care. And I'm not saying we offer all those things within a home within, but there's a piece of it that isn't defined, isn't captured, isn't, boxed in. I think that is just almost addicting. And think
I
people
could see that. Yeah.
and I wonder on this point of spreading this availability. Do you use video platforms too? Can people from states that, maybe don't have the chapters directly there,
Oh,
can they
yeah. Good
also
question.
work with you?
Yeah, we're always looking to expand, and it doesn't take that much to expand.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's really, yeah, we're always looking to expand. This is, yeah.
You use video sometimes?
Oh yeah, we use video. Telehealth is full. I would say
Telehealth.
nowadays, especially post COVID,
Yeah.
Mhm.
very popular. So some people have, and again, this is oftentimes in a bridge, like an open sort of, not an abridged, but a part of oftentimes, this is, yeah, sorry. Oftentimes, this is a part of folks' private practice.
Mhm.
So we have clinicians who have office spaces, so they see people in person. We have folks who are only virtual telehealth therapists, so they see their clients virtually. So it's very flexible.
It's great. Um, I don't know, Tyler, if you don't have anything immediately, I have so many questions, but I know we have
Yeah.
to limit
Yeah.
our time too. Another
Please.
question I had was on outcomes. Has anybody done any studies, or have you all done surveys with your patients? Have any data about how people, you know, turn out or how they unfold through the process in your work?
So we're in the process of really being able to compile data on
Mm,
patients and really understanding, like we see certain things like a reduction in anxiety, right? Reduction in like we do like the PHQ testing, reduction in like PTSD symptoms. But that's actually part of kind of ongoing work. Like how can we really capture the effect anecdotally, yeah, but also in terms of just like data points, like what's really the impact of a home within and how is it unique to
right.
others
Mhm.
and
Are
how
you,
can hmm?
I'm sorry, are you giving people assessments periodically? Is that what you mean?
So we're giving folks assessments, PHQ-9s, ACEs. Well, we start off with ACEs just to kind of get a picture of what's going on. But PHQ-9 is really the big one. I forget the names of the various assessments. So that's kind of how we're looking at it. But there is a push right now to really, how do we capture
Mhm.
the impact of this sort of everlasting model? What
Right.
is the impact that, testing can't see?
Yeah, good. Qualitative research.
Mhm.
Mm.
That's my thought anyway.
Yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm looking to get my PhD too, so we're
Ah,
just trying to think. We're trying to be really sort of innovative in terms of like how we're thinking about these things. But yeah.
great. Oh, oh. Hope
Kirk,
that
did you have
go ahead.
follow up?
Um, well, at one point when you were talking about the younger kids, especially, I wonder if you also see families as part of the context of the work, or is it just the kids?
Mhm. Mhm.
Right now, we usually see individuals, like most volunteers see individuals.
Is it-
There are people who do work with parent and child.
Ah,
I would say most of our volunteers who see children you're obviously going to be working, anyone under the age of 18, we're working with either the foster parents or
Mhm.
working with some sort of like, if it's an open adoption or open sort of situation, they can work with the biological parents in addition to adoptive parents or fostered parents. So it's a mixed bag, mostly individual therapy, but that does happen.
Yeah, and so it sounds like you're building some relationships with family members too, because
Mhm.
clearly they're needing some, or they may not realize they're needing some shifts in the way they relate to their kids. But through working with you all, maybe they do realize some things about their patterns. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, and it's hard because sometimes there is just so much fracture within the family system, even
Mhm.
with younger children. I mean, particularly with younger children. But yeah, I love it when I can get family in the room, especially with kids, because again, we talk about modeling.
Yes.
We talk about providing corrective experiences. I think the therapeutic space can be such a rich plane for that to happen and for parents to be reinforced in regards to their parenting. Because when we think about a child that's been separated from their parent or, you know, parents that have been told for X amount of years, you're a bad parent, you're not good enough, you're not doing enough
Mm.
to be,
Right.
even if it's just an hour and a half, to provide some, not just education, but again, that corrective experience,
Yeah.
mirroring, that reflecting, that positive regard. So many people are thirsting for that, especially with the population. And it can be so powerful, really, really powerful.
Yeah.
You mentioned city council members at one point going in and talking in front of them. Can you talk a little bit about how that plays into a home within and also funding, if any, that is coming in? Because there is, I know that a lot of it is still the volunteer hours of the therapist, but
Mhm.
there, but structurally, I'm still interested in kind of how
Yeah.
this is able to exist when
Mm.
there isn't money coming in for the sessions.
Yeah.
Because I think that this is such a barrier for folks. I've talked to people that are interested in doing things similar to this, but they don't know how. How do you provide something at this level, at this kind of scope across the nation and not charge?
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. And, I can't speak to the sort of particularities of our development, but there is a portion of the organization that does focus on development. And with that
Mhm.
development, it's building relationships, securing grants, federal, city, state, in order to procure funding for training, funding for, staff and so that's a definite part of the organization.
Yeah.
And there's so many private individuals who do, fell in love with the mission, do support a Home Within as an organization, you know, and we're very thankful for that, obviously, because yes, there's a volunteer staff, but there's also the layer of administration that works
Hmm.
to coordinate all of these things, all of these pieces together, which really helps to just make sure we're functioning, and
Yeah.
things are happening in terms of making sure the staff is certified, they're licensed, insurance is up to, all of those sort of
Hmm.
particularities of an organization. So I would say there's a development arm. And so a lot of that is meeting sort of the people who are in those places who can provide the organization with support where they're at.
And
Mhm.
do you have to be licensed at the MA and or PhD level in order to join or to volunteer?
No, you can be an associate. You just would have to provide proof, or we would have to provide that supervision support.
Yes,
Hmm.
it's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah, really is. Yep.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, I'm curious. What are some of the kind of systemic barriers that to the mental health equity that you for for foster youth that you've noticed in your work? Because before your time with the Home Within and since partnering.
Yeah. Before I was with the Home Within, I would say some of the barriers that I was aware of or noticed. I mean, it's economic, but even more than that, oftentimes there is, I guess, just a lack of cultural cohesion.
Yeah.
So in regards to the providers versus who the clients were,
Mm-hmm.
wasn't
Mm-hmm.
a good sort of match. And so folks felt unmotivated, uninspired to continue with therapy, right? It didn't feel
Yeah.
useful, felt too
Yes.
textbook.
Yeah.
And I think that's why when we talk about a home within, that relational model is so valuable because
Mm-hmm.
because again, it's we don't just want people, we want them to stay. We want them to heal. We want them to, as you put it, Kirk, like decorate their souls, you know? And so I would say that was outside of sort of socioeconomic, there really was a sort of an interpersonal deficit or mismatch.
Mhm.
And how do you overcome that? Because even with the model of this relational depth therapy, there's still could be that divide in are we able to connect as therapist and patient? Do you
Mhm.
think that part of that is just built into the a home within's approach, which is just we're going to have more time to be able to achieve that level of familiarity, where if there is a an offset in a
Mhm.
different kind of setting, you only have 12 sessions to get there. But
Yeah.
with the home within, it's hey, we started off and we were on very different, you know, um, places, but over time, look at what we have found that is in common.
Yeah. I think it's a little bit of both of what you said. I think that
Mm-hmm.
there is something about the model that, really does push for that relationship. And we know people don't stay because of the things or the free drinks in the back or the free snacks. People stay for the relationship. They stay because of how
Yeah.
people make them feel. So I think
Yeah.
there's that element of that. I also think that is something that we hit up against as well, right? We know that within the United States, there's a, sort of maybe disparity in terms of population, particularly if we're talking about foster youth population, racial dynamics versus the racial compilation of available, licensed therapists or even
Mm-hmm.
associate therapists, PhD level psychologists, psychiatrists that are available in the field, right? And so that is something that we're always, really toggling with, right? And then our means of addressing it is we do provide a lot of continuing education for
Mm-hmm.
our clinicians in order to just support them. And it's not a matter of this is what, the Black people, the Latino people, the Asian people, the white people need,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Sometimes culturally responsive education can feel like that, but it's really talking
Mm-hmm.
about who are you? Because if you can really understand self, then you can then you can help someone understand themselves.
Mhm.
As I've
Yeah.
kind of grown with my training, it's not just about we need more Black folks or we need more Asians or we need more Latinos or we need more this. We need people who can hold space
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
people can feel it. Our clients can feel it. They know it.
Yes.
They sense
Yeah.
it. And so a lot of our training is around, various topics, but there's this sort of thorough line of attunement.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I
Thorough
was
line
just
of,
thinking about this. Yeah. A colleague of ours recently did his dissertation on, and Kirk was on the committee on presence, the um, the therapist's experience.
Well, yeah, two different ones. One
Yeah.
did one on the therapist's experience of presence, and the other student did one on the client's perception of the
Yeah.
therapist's presence.
That's
Both
amazing.
Yes.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yes. And
And
not always attuned. Not always
not always
into, oh,
attuned, but
I thought we were this, and apparently we're over here. And we can think that we're doing great work, and it's like, yeah, I don't understand. And then you come to learn, well, there's a bit of kind of how should I show up? Therapy is ending soon. I don't want to. There's this sense that you know at times patients may kind of lean into the expectation of, well, look at the work that the therapist has put in. Maybe I need to kind of seem better because that's what you do after these 12 sessions.
Mhm.
But if you have this kind of format, you can kind of hopefully it lends to kind of cutting through that and saying, like, we're going to be here as long as it takes. How are you
Yeah.
really?
these dissertations also found that presence was foundational to the other pieces that have been identified as associated with effective healing, effective therapy, the empathy and
Mm-hmm.
warmth, and attunement and collaboration and credibility. I mean, presence
Yeah,
Mhm.
is, I agree, I'm with you. It's at the core, it seems to me.
absolutely. And it's not packaged a particular way. You know,
Mhm.
I I've had some supervisors that were, and again, I went to Columbia, so I've had some supervisors and teachers that were, New York tough. You know what I mean? Man, they were some of the best. And when we talk about presence, they had it, and I felt it. And I was like, I'm gaining so much from this relationship. I'm
Mhm.
learning so much, not just about the topic, but about myself.
Mm.
And it's because
Mhm.
they held the space. Yeah, they were, slick talking, like doing, but they had that
Yeah.
presence. And so I think I'm always thinking of this when I'm teaching. I'm just like, how can we really support students with developing that? And developing that
Yeah.
requires a knowledge of self that isn't trivial, a knowledge of self that's really gone through a sort of examination, right?
Yeah. That's where it's helpful to have one's own depth therapy, and especially, in my view, experiential depth therapy. It's not just talking about issues, uh, or maybe not even just about the verbal channel, but also what are you sensing, feeling here and now with me?
Oh, yes.
How do you, it's reclaiming one's body. You mentioned that before. The body is so impacted by trauma as well as the mind, right?
Yeah. One of the core concepts that took my breath away when I started my psychoanalytic training was this concept of this sort of the pre-verbal self.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness. I mean, it put into language so much of that ineffableness, if you know what I'm saying,
Mhm.
that you would
Mhm.
feel or experience in the room with someone. And when we talk
Yes.
about dynamics, parental dynamics, when we talk about those early, early relations, right?
Yes.
And we really have that language around like pre-verbal experiences, pre-verbal trauma, pre-verbal
Mhm.
understandings.
Yes.
I mean, it's incredible. The only word I can use is like it takes my breath away because it really
Mhm.
encapsulates,
Mhm. It's
especially
very
with
poetic.
it is. I mean, psychoanalysis is poetic.
Yes.
If
Yeah.
you really allow yourself to delve into the topic and don't, oftentimes, especially in certain trainings, it's this is what you're doing, this is what you have to do, this is the handbook.
Yes.
When you take these
Yes.
theories and you allow yourself to just hold them and sort of observe your patient.
Mhm.
Oh, I get chills. So
But
much.
but the
Yeah.
the pre-verbal taking your breath away. being poetic is just such a beautiful way to think about it. And I wish we had more time because now we're kind of getting into your psychoanalytic training,
Yeah.
and I would love to know more about that as well. I know we're kind of coming up on an hour here,
Yeah.
but this is this is you know very informative and selfishly very interesting just for me to sit here and learn from you and your experience. And I'm, yeah, I have no doubt that this is going to be very interesting for our listeners and our certificate members. And
Yes.
yeah. Kirk, do you want to?
No, I appreciate, all that you've said, and I'm I'm really heartened to hear, at least what I'm hearing, uh, of a sort of holistic paradigm
Mm,
that you come from. Because obviously psychoanalysis could be defined in, you know, a variety of ways, but it sounds like you're working more with the contemporary relational psychoanalytic perspectives that have to do with the human being, with another human being that's humanistic in many ways, and not just, more by a certain, as you say, playbook
mhm,
recall, which removes that. And also very heartened to hear that you do bring the body in, that the notion of attunement is a part, it sounds like it's a part of the supervision, the practice that you cultivate, with your staff. Um, yeah, the whole idea of that sometimes you just can't wrap words around it. You got to be with
mhm,
it
mhm,
and and uh, open your vulnerability as a therapist to the degree, you know, appropriate to the moment
mhm,
and the person. As very much a part of the healing because you're modeling something so critical for that person. You're helping to hold the torment. And yet you're surviving.
Yeah.
That's an important piece. Maybe not only surviving, but thriving.
Yeah.
You know that you're holding it. So anyway, these are thoughts that passing through me as I hear you talk.
Mm. I love that. That was beautiful.
But
Thank you so much. No, this conversation was amazing. This is I love this stuff. So
yeah,
I love that. I love the work that you all do. I think depth psychology, psychoanalysis, it really does bring a different thing,
mhm,
say it very plainly, but it really does bring a very different thing to the work, a very real thing to the work. And I really commend anyone that is sort of charged to bring this perspective to, whether it's students, foster youth, or the private practice clients that we see, people that we see in the community. I'm in admiration of it. So this was wonderful, wonderful. So thank you so much.
thank you.
admiration is mutual, Anna.
Thank you. Yeah.
So appreciative of you being with us here.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.